Welcome to Sam's Business Growth Show. I'm Sam Dunning, a digital marketing, sales, and business growth evangelist. Tune in and subscribe today as I'll be interviewing business leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs from around the globe. You'll be learning their story, how digital marketing has helped them along the way, and exclusive tips and insights to help you skyrocket your own business. And welcome back to Sam's Business Growth Show. I'm very excited today to be joined by James Carbary. James is the founder at Sweetfish Media. He's co-host of the Top 100 podcast, B2B Growth. It's been downloaded more than 3.5 million times. He's a contributor for Business Insider, Entrepreneur.com, and Huffington Post. He's also author of the best-selling book, Content-Based Networking. James, a true pleasure to have you on. How are you doing, sir?
I am fantastic, Sam. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome, man. So there's plenty we want to learn from you today, James. We'd love to learn your top business growth strategies, your top digital marketing tips. But before we get into that juicy info, we want to know a little bit more about yourself, really, James. So it'd be great to know kind of where you grew up, some of the key places you've worked at, and the lessons that you learned along the way up until you founded your own business. If you guide us through the journey, sir.
Yeah. So I grew up in a really small town in right outside of Oklahoma City here in the States. And I, had no clue. I went to college, got my business degree, finished, worked at a couple corporate jobs there in Oklahoma City, and really had no clue what the word entrepreneurship even was. Which is probably a little bit of an indictment on my university, considering that I got a business degree. But I finished up, started doing the corporate thing, realized it was not my bag. I was not enjoying it at all. I ended up in the accounting department of an oil and gas company, and really just kind of banging my head up against the wall, wondering like, man, is this what work is? Is it just something that I begrudgingly go to every day because I've got to pay the bills? And a few years before that, about a year and a half, actually, before I started working for that oil and gas company, my roommate's brother-in-law won a sweepstakes through a big phone company, former phone company called Alltel. And it was one of those sweepstakes you see on TV and you're like, nobody ever actually wins those. But we won it. And it was an all expense trip paid. It was an all expense trip to New York City on a private jet. We got to watch a football game in the big box suite next to like the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. It was ridiculous experience. Yeah, and we got to take we had a police escort take us around this tour bus all over New York City. Got to go to Carnegie Deli, toured Times Square, did all the stuff that you could possibly do.
Yeah, sure.
And at the end of the day, I've gone through this entire experience, and I found myself connecting with this guy named Jeff, and I just thought Jeff was this low-level employee at Alltel. He was the person in charge of making sure we got from point A to point B all throughout the day. And I didn't really think anything of it. Well, as it turns out, Jeff is the CEO of this global logistics company that Alltel had hired to run the trip. And Jeff really likes New York. And so Jeff wanted to go to New York to run this trip himself. And we hit it off. We swapped business cards. I didn't have a business card at the time. I was like a senior in college. And so I did, but I stayed in contact with him. We went back and forth a few emails. I think we maybe texted a few times. Didn't really think much of it. Well, I'm sitting in that oil and gas company and in the accounting department, banging my head up against the wall, a year and a half after meeting Jeff. And I get a phone call from Jeff, and he says, hey, we've got a position opening up in our business. Would you want to come to Orlando, Florida, which is, across the country, to run the helicopter division of our business for our NASCAR client base? NASCAR, if you're not familiar, is race cars. It's the U.S. version of, it's our race car system or whatever. So crazy opportunity. And I'm thinking to myself, like, is this really a thing? Like helicopter logistics for NASCAR? So essentially, these race car drivers, they want to get out of the track and back to their private jet pretty quick. And they don't want to have to deal with all the traffic around the racetrack post race. So So Jeff's company basically charters helicopters on behalf of all of their clients that are drivers for NASCAR, and they needed somebody to organize all those logistics. So I, of course, said yes, prayed about it for a little bit, then said yes, packed up my life, moved across the country, and ended up working for Jeff for about 3 years. And that was really where I learned what entrepreneurship looked like. I mean, Jeff showed me what it took to run a business. I got to see a lot of highs and a lot of lows, and
Literally, by the sounds of it.
ultimately, yeah, it was a wild ride, and no pun intended. But I got to ride in a lot of helicopters over those 3 years, and it was an incredible experience. I got to really see what it looked like to run a P&L, to make business decisions, to see some things succeed and some things fail. And what that taught me, Sam, was that a single relationship can change the trajectory of your entire life. Had we
Got it.
not had the opportunity to win that sweepstakes and meet Jeff, who knows what I would be doing? Would I still be at an oil and gas company in Oklahoma hating my life? I don't know. And so that because of that singular relationship with Jeff, he moved me across the country. I was able to meet my wife while, after moving to Orlando. So who knows if I ever would have crossed paths with Lisa had it not been for Jeff's, asking me to move to Orlando. I'm now an entrepreneur. I own my own business. I'm officially
Amazing.
unemployable for the rest of my life, I think. And so I, and that would have never happened. It's hard for me to believe that would have ever happened without Jeff's intersection in my life. So,
Got it.
so that being said, the understanding that a single relationship is really powerful. When we started our business, it was a blog writing firm. And for the first year, all we did was write blog posts for a bunch of different businesses. We didn't really have a strong niche or strong focus. I just knew I wanted to be in business for myself. And I was really passionate about content marketing. So we did it. And about 9 months in, my buddy and I had a podcast that we were doing kind of passively on the side, not a big deal. But I realized that anybody that I asked to be a guest on the show said yes. Very similar to what you and I were talking about earlier. When you have a
Exactly.
podcast and you ask somebody to be a guest, it's a very flattering thing. Most people say yes to being a guest to a podcast. And so I
Sure.
thought to myself, man, if we could do this for a company in the context of business development, and we could say, hey, ideal customer, I want you to be a guest on our podcast, and we want to share your story, and we want to share really great content from you, things you've learned along the way. That could be a fantastic way to do content marketing really well, but it could also be a really strategic way to build one-to-one relationships with the exact buyer persona of the person that can buy your product or service. And so we started doing that, and we started a show called B2B Growth. It's now been downloaded over 3.5 million times. It's gone on to be really the foundation of our entire business's growth strategy, because we know that VPs of marketing at B2B technology companies are our ideal buyers. So we go and ask those people to be a guest on the show. We create really great content with them based on their experiments that they're running at their companies, things they're learning, ways they're growing. And then we build one-to-one relationships with them. So a lot of them end up using us whenever they want to produce their own podcast. And so,
Amazing. Okay.
so that's been the kind of the underpinning of our strategy, and takes us to where we are today.
Fantastic, James. Well, that's quite a story. And it's like you say, it's amazing that a relationship that you forged back in New York, one and a half years prior, then came into that. Cool. It's amazing how
Yeah.
these kind of things work out. And sometimes
Yeah.
opportunities come in the places you least expect them, just like you say.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's not an overnight thing. It takes time, and I hope that I wish that more people. I mean, I struggle with patience.
Same.
My wife could attest to that. But man, with relationships, it's a patience game, and if you can play the long game, and you're investing in strategic relationships, you're going to ultimately win.
Brilliant. Okay. So from helicopters to podcasting. So you said your company originally was did you say it was blog creation? Is that what you said,
Yeah,
James?
blog creation. So I had been working for a startup in a tech company for about 9 months,
Right.
and I really started studying content marketing while I was at that business. And then I had a tiny tech startup that I founded shortly before that failed within about 6 months. But
Okay.
through both of those ventures, I had started learning about content marketing and, just this concept of creating content so that your buyers come to you as opposed to you having to interrupt their life and try to sell them on working with you. It's just a whole lot easier when they come to you. And so I became really passionate about this content marketing strategy and was like, man, I know a lot of small businesses
Got it.
can't do this on their own because they just don't have the time, they don't have the bandwidth. And so we went to market as a blog writing agency, quickly realized that, there's a lot of blog writing agencies out there. It's very competitive. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. So we weren't pricing our service right. I mean, we could barely make ends meet month to month. And so when I had this epiphany about, needing to start a podcast, I thought, well, what if we pivoted into becoming a podcast agency instead of a blog writing agency? And what if we became a podcast agency, not for anyone, but specifically for mid-market B2B technology companies? And that's most companies are scared to niche once. We niched twice. And so because of kind of that double niching down, it's really allowed us to cement authority in a very specific space. So we don't do all digital marketing services, and I'm proud of that. I think a big part of our success is because we're not known for doing websites and everything, Facebook ads and email marketing. We do podcasts and we do them really, really well. We're best in class when it comes to producing a podcast for a company's brand. And so we've been able to establish a lot of authority and really stand out in the noise, where a lot of other marketing agencies are struggling to stay top of mind because they don't really have a niche focus. And then focusing on specifically B2B SaaS companies helps us a ton too, because we can speak the language of our buyer because we work with a lot of people that look like them.
Okay. All right, James. Well, yeah, a lot of our guests have kind of homed in on this kind of stuff, that you really should pick it your niche, understand your
Yeah.
ideal audience. So that does make perfect sense, man. In terms of, what was the turning point when you realized that you could get your ideal audience as interviewees for your podcast, and then over time nurture relationships with them and get them into your customers? I mean, were you running I think you mentioned you were running a podcast before. Did it just
Yeah.
kind of click that you could do that? Or was there a turning point where you realized that you could monetize this, let's say?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. So I remember being on a plane coming back from my wife's hometown in San Diego, California. And on the plane is when I realized, like, oh my gosh, why are we not starting why do we not have a niche podcast that we can ask our ideal clients to be a guest on? Because all of these people in with my buddy show, they all say yes whenever we ask them to be a guest on that show. Why would that be any different in a business context? And so I actually didn't start it with B2B growth. I started it with a podcast called Plant Better, because at the time, being a blog writing agency, we had a church client that was doing really well with the work that we were producing. And I thought, man, we could write content for a lot of other churches. And so we started this podcast called Plant Better, specifically for kind of startup churches.
Okay.
And we asked 100 different church planners, which are very busy people. I mean, their church plants are new. They're wearing a ton of different hats. And we asked 100 different church planners to be a guest on this brand new podcast. It didn't even exist yet. And 80 of them responded to our email. And
Wow.
I mean, you've been doing digital marketing enough,
That's what
Sam,
you
to
call a
know that,
response rate.
yeah, to get 80% reply rate on your cold email campaign is pretty insane. And so it turns out church plants don't have a lot of money, so they don't have a lot of cash to pay for content marketing services. So that ended up not working out the way we originally thought. But
Got it.
it was after doing Plant Better for about, I think we
Aha.
did probably 45 episodes, that we said, man, we should pivot into becoming a podcast agency and do this strategy for other B2B companies. So that's when we became a
Makes
podcast
sense.
agency and pivoted into that.
Excellent. So you learnt from kind of, you could do this model whereby 80% of people you'd ask would say yes to come on the show. You realized
Yep.
that from the church side of things, there wasn't necessarily that much money in it. So you moved the angle to an ideal audience, in this case,
Yep.
mid-market
B2B
businesses.
companies.
Superb. Okay,
Yeah.
man, that makes sense. So, in terms of being able to scale your business from when you first started to where it is now, was that entirely via guests that you had on the show, or is there any other forms of marketing that you've had success with, James? Be it content marketing, be it outbound, be it inbound, you could share with us.
Yeah, so we've tried a lot of different things. Our primary, the primary kind of way that we acquire customers is through inbound. So people that either listen to our show or that
Okay.
have been guests on our show that come back to us. Another big channel for us, and we might be getting into this a little bit later. I might be jumping the gun here, but it's LinkedIn. I figured out a few years ago that there was just a massive opportunity with organic reach on LinkedIn, and so I started writing content that was getting, hundreds of thousands of views, and I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm not paying a dime for this kind of reach. And so I think I went from 6,000 followers on the platform to 18 or 19,000 followers on the platform within a pretty short amount of time. And I just thought, man, I need to be doing more of this. Unfortunately, I went through a really tough time in the business and personally, and there was just a lot going on in my life. So I took about a 1.5 to 2 year hiatus from LinkedIn and have just now started to re-engage. And we're about to go all in on LinkedIn again now that we have a bigger team. There's about 20 of us, and there's
Nice.
going to be 5 of us that are gonna, in the next 6 months, hopefully posting 3 times a day on LinkedIn, because I just think there's such massive opportunity there to get in front of the people that we want to sell to.
You said it, all in LinkedIn. I mean, the organic reach on that platform, my audience know that I don't stop harping on about it, but I'm going to say a quick statement because, like you say, the organic reach, because it's free, it's a free platform. It's never been easier to reach your ideal audience, get
Yep.
organic views, get more people to your profile, to your landing page, your hook, and generate
Yep.
inbound inquiries. It's just
Yeah.
a matter of being consistent every day.
Yeah,
Couldn't be
it's a
easier.
matter of being consistent, and then there's also some nuances to the platform that I've found a lot of people don't realize that folks
Sure.
like you and I that are creating there, we've come to figure out. But folks that haven't, they don't necessarily realize that you can't put links in your status update. You have to put the link in the comment section, and I know that that's frustrating for some people because they're like, oh, it's easier, but the reality is, there LinkedIn doesn't want you posting content that's going to drive people off of their platform. So you either make it easy for the 6 people that see your post by putting the link in your status update, or you get 10,000 more views on your content by putting the link to whatever it is you're trying to link to, which I don't even link to things most of my updates, but you put the link, if you have a link, in your first comment. And then you've got to be good at copywriting. I mean, there's no way around it. If you suck at copywriting and you don't know how to write a compelling hook for your first sentence in your status update, you're going to fail. I mean, that nobody's going to stop on your post, and you're not going to get much reach at all. So there are a couple nuances like that, that I think, using engagement groups. So messaging groups on LinkedIn where you have 10 or 15 people that like and trust already, that you're liking their content already, they're posting consistently, and being able to distribute your content through those engagement groups and engaging with the other people in the group so that you can get those first 10 or 15 likes, comments on your content, to give it that kind of boost to tell LinkedIn, like, hey, this content's getting engagement. We want more people to see this. And so then it starts to stretch out and show to more people in news feeds because it got that initial kind of jump start. So a little nuances like that. Like I wrote an
Yeah, I
article in
love that.
Entrepreneur about this. And so if
Okay.
you just search James Carbary Entrepreneur, you'll see like the 7 things that I talk about to get thousands of views on your LinkedIn content. But it really is a platform that a lot of businesses are sleeping on. And we're even seeing like, a lot of mid-market and enterprise companies that have no clue what they're doing on LinkedIn. They continue to put content out through their company page and get next to no reach. And they're massive companies. Meanwhile, my little 20-person company is getting, across our team, we're getting close to 100,000 organic free views a week because we've got multiple people on our team posting content on a consistent basis.
Exactly, and completely agree. I don't know what you've seen, James. I love the points you've raised, definitely about keeping links in the comments rather than in the post, and then using the first I think it's 3 lines that are above the fold.
Yeah.
So until you click read more on mobile or click the post
Yep.
on your desktop, then you read the rest. I found success myself from trying to craft some of my best posts into more stories. So
Yeah.
trying to work experiences that I've had, be it business related, be it personal, be it even doing sport or doing something with
Yeah.
friends, work that into a kind of story format. So it
Yep.
kind of weaves from top to bottom. And I found some of those have had the best results. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, so I don't tend to do as well with those. I think it's probably just because I'm not naturally as good of a storyteller as a lot of people are. Um, I've had a lot of really good success with roundup posts. So you see a lot of roundup blog articles where they share 27 books for XYZ audience, or listen to these 7 podcasts. I've been doing that with my LinkedIn status updates. And you and I keep talking about status updates and I've noticed that a lot of people aren't familiar with what that is. With LinkedIn, you can write articles, you can do these slide decks, which we've been experimenting with. They're called documents, and those have seen really good results. And then you can do status updates. So you don't want to do an article. An article has no word count restriction. You can make them as long as you want, but the unfortunate part is they don't get a lot of traction on LinkedIn. The algorithm, for whatever reason, doesn't like articles. But status updates, they're limited. They're going to limit you to about 250 to 300 words. It's, I think, 1,200 characters. And those status updates are really where the magic comes from on LinkedIn. And that's going to be where the bulk of whenever you're scrolling your newsfeed on LinkedIn, you're seeing those status updates. So for those that aren't as familiar with it, that's what we're referring to. Remind me where we were at, Sam, before I went off on
So
my
you were saying the posts were. I was saying I had some success with a post that tells stories, and you were saying
Yeah.
you had a different angle. I think it was roundup post. You were saying, James.
Yeah, so roundup posts. So I've done posts like 14 agencies every B2B marketer should be looking to hire. And so I put ourselves in there. I put an SEO agency in there. I put a demand gen agency in there. I put a pipeline strategy agency in there, an account-based marketing agency in there. And then I've done one on the best books for B2B marketers. So honing in on who your audience is. For us, it's B2B marketing leaders, and figuring out curating the best content for that audience, and then putting it in roundup posts. But really, I mean, if I'm being honest, Sam, like, you have to do a lot of different things. Like, I found that if you don't switch it up and you don't do, and you're not experimenting with different things, we're about to start doing a lot of GIFs and memes on LinkedIn, which you're not seeing
Nice.
a lot of, but
Yep.
the few that you're seeing are getting crazy reach because it's fun content. And just because it's a business platform doesn't mean that people don't want to smile. And so doing GIFs and memes, doing funny videos. We just produced a funny video for announcing a new series on B2B growth, and we're going to be releasing that, I think, today or tomorrow. So we're constantly experimenting and trying new things. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, eventually it's just going to get tired.
Yep.
And people are going to stop engaging with it as much. So I know that's not the easy answer. You want to figure out what's this magic pill that gets me a ton of reach on LinkedIn. But the reality is it takes a lot of creativity. It takes a lot of understanding how the platform works and how the algorithm works.
Certainly.
But when you can combine those two things, you're going to build an audience of people that trust you and ultimately want to do business with you.
Love it, and I couldn't agree more. Okay, good stuff, James. So we've covered LinkedIn. Are there any other marketing channels that you invest in or that you recommend for business owners or
so
salespeople?
we've just recently started working with a company called the Veth Group, VETH, and Miles and his team have been fantastic. They've started doing a lot more outbound for us. So we're still doing content-based networking and asking our ideal buyers to be a guest on our show. But what Veth Group does for us is a more scaled version of outbound. So there's a lot of data. I think Connect and Sell talks about some data that says that the average service provider or product, only 8% of your target addressable market, or your total addressable market, is in market for your solution at any given time. And that 8% typically changes every quarter. So if we know that 8% of our market is ready to get into podcasting, which is our service, then we've got to send a lot of messages to to our TAM to make sure that they know that we're available and we can work with them. And so when you change your mindset to thinking we want to reach out to as many companies as we possibly can to let them know, hey, we're here and we do this, if this is something you're looking at, it changes your approach to the messaging, because you don't think that you necessarily have to you're not trying to convince every single person to work with you. You know that, hey, only 8% of the people that I'm, that I'm emailing, there's likely only 8% of these people are even in market. And that doesn't mean that they're going to work with you. That just means they're in market for the thing that you do. And so Miles and his team have done an incredible job of getting really creative with our outbound. And so, we're sending really short 1-sentence emails that say stuff like, hey, so-and-so, is podcasting in your Q2 budget. That's it. Like, we're not droning on and on about how
Nice.
we're a great agency. And it's a 1-sentence email. We're testing out another campaign where we're offering to buy them lunch. And so, like, we find a local restaurant in their city, and we'll email a bunch of people in a particular city and say, hey, Fogo de Chao has the best steak, the best steak in San Francisco. We'd love to send you one for lunch in exchange for 12 minutes of your time to talk about podcasting. And so just doing creative things with outbound, in addition to what we're doing on LinkedIn, in addition to what we're doing with content-based networking through our podcast, in addition to the inbound that we're generating through the podcast listenership. And it's really starting to work. I mean, we're closing multiple deals every month, and it's a really exciting time to be in our business.
Awesome, James. Well, we've covered your story. We covered some of your top marketing strategies. Normally at this stage of the show, I'd ask, what are your top tips for anyone thinking of starting a business? But I don't want to do that. I want to know your top tips for someone who's thinking of starting a podcast,
yes,
which people probably are after listening to this, or tuning in.
Yeah. So I would say that the biggest mistake that I see people make is with the name of their show. So many people want the focus of their show to be their expertise. But what that does is it assumes that your show is going to have a large audience. And if you're like Joe Rogan and you're bringing in an existing audience because you already had a massive personal brand, then that can be a great way to go. But if you brand your show, you've branded your show, Sam, around business growth, which is great because your customers are folks that have grown their business. And so you want to position your show as a spotlight for your ideal buyer, not as a spotlight for your expertise. So the way that works out with our show, we started a show called B2B Growth. We didn't start the B2B podcasting show. We didn't start the Sweetfish Media podcast. We did that because we wanted our ideal buyer to want to be a guest on our show. And our ideal buyer is a B2B marketer. So they know a thing or two about B2B growth. And so when we reach out and ask them to be on a show called B2B Growth, they want to do it because it highlights their expertise. They can tell their peers, hey, I've been on a show called B2B Growth, as opposed to being on a show that's all about us and our expertise. They're going to look at that and go, why would I be on the B2B podcasting show? I don't know anything about B2B podcasting. Well, of course they don't. We do. But we want the show to be a tool for us to build relationships with people that we can potentially work with. So branding your show not around your own expertise, which sounds weird. I get it. It sounds odd. Like, it's my show. Why would my show not be about my expertise? But it makes so much more sense to brand your show around your ideal buyer, because you ultimately want them to be a guest and you want them talking about their expertise so that it can attract other people in their space that also are trying to grow and learn in that specific expertise. And over time, you as the host become an expert in the thing that they're also an expert in, which means they look at you as a peer and not somebody that's trying to sell them something. And that's really where the magic happens. When Logan, the co-host of our show and our director of partnerships, when he gets listed online as a B2B marketing thought leader, that warms my soul because he's our sales guy. Like, he's the person that is selling our service to the market, and he's listed as a thought leader in all these different articles online in B2B marketing because he's now the host of our show, and he's hosting all of these great conversations about B2B marketing. So he inherits that thought leadership from all of our guests just by being the host of the show. And now he gets interviewed about B2B marketing because he knows so much about it because he's interviewed so many people. So, so that's what I would say is the biggest tip for starting a podcast is
Awesome, man.
make sure that you name it correctly, because if you get the name wrong, it's gonna inhibit your ability to use the show to interview your ideal buyers.
Love it. Love it. And that has got so many benefits to it, like you say, because rather than just naming the show around yourself or something you specialize in, you're pigeonholing it really.
Yeah.
For one, people aren't only going to want to hear what you've got to say. Well, they certainly aren't going to only hear what I got to say. That's why I get guests just like yourself that know things a lot better than I do about certain subjects. And yeah, you can learn from the people, like you say, James. So that makes really good sense. Cool. Okay. So before we wrap things up, there's something else I'd like to know. I know you've had some pretty big guests on your podcast over the years. Gary Vee to name one.
Yeah.
So have you got any tips for anyone tuning in on how we're able to connect and reach out to huge people in business, such as Gary Vee, and get them on shows?
So I'll have a strange answer for you on this. We've interviewed the two biggest names are Gary Vee and Simon Sinek. And I will tell you that those two episodes are our least downloaded episodes in our collection of 1,600 plus episodes.
Whoa.
And I say that to say this. Most people think that getting a big name like that is going to explode their show. But here's the reality. Those people are a big deal because they put out a prolific amount of content themselves. They're spending all of their time trying to figure out how to promote their own content. They don't have time, and they shouldn't make time to promote the podcasts that they're on. So many people think that by having those big names, it's going to catapult their show to a different level. And that's just not the case. It's a long slog to grow a podcast audience. We were very fortunate. We ranked for the keyword B2B in Apple Podcasts. So whenever you're thinking about naming your show, think about what are my ideal listeners typing into Apple Podcasts, and name your show around one or two of those keywords so that you can show up whenever people are searching. But make sure that you're cross promoting your show on other podcasts. Make sure you're talking about your show on LinkedIn. That's how your show's audience is going to grow. I have found that getting big guests is not a shortcut to growing your audience. The other thing the other reason why I think that people shouldn't necessarily focus on getting these big name thought leaders is because those big name thought leaders can't they're not going to do business with you. Simon Sinek's not going to hire us to do his podcast. Gary Vee's obviously not going to hire us to do his podcast. He's got a team of people that can do that stuff for him. And so by focusing on the people that you can actually do business with, and by featuring them as guests on your show, you're actually building relationships with people that can give you dollars for the work that you can do for them. Now, that doesn't mean that you should go straight for the kill and right after the interview ask them to do business with you, but you're building those relationships over time so that and really establishing a friendship with that person so that whenever there is a need, they can come back to you. And because I know that Simon Sinek and Gary Vee are never going to hire us to do their podcast, it was fun. Like it was with Simon Sinek, his publisher reached out to us when he launched a new book and asked if he could be on the show. So that one came inbound to us and I was like, sure, I'll interview Simon Sinek. That's fun. And then the Gary Vee opportunity happened because I was doing a virtual event with somebody and they were like, hey, we should get Gary Vee to be a part of the virtual event. And I was like, sure, if you can get him. And that guy ended up having an in with somebody on Gary's team. And I got to go to Chattanooga, Tennessee and interview him in person. So that was a really cool opportunity. And it certainly, it makes the show credible.
Got it.
But I see a lot of podcast hosts that are focused on getting those influencers and they think it's going to make a much bigger difference than what it actually does. And I think I just think that's a mistake. I would much rather focus my time on trying to interview people that I can actually do business with.
That is an amazing tip. And I've never actually thought of it that way. Although now you've explained it, it sounds a lot simpler to me. But working with the people you actually want to do business with, and like you say, if you are getting massive celebrities in the business world and sales world, wherever, or marketing world, like you say, they're not going to have the time to start sharing your episodes even after they are recorded or sharing up the content. Whereas people that necessarily that aren't necessarily as big, as famous, as well known probably will share your content. They probably will post it on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, on social, on their
Yep.
blog, on their website, on all these different channels.
And when you think about that, Sam, who do you think they're sharing it with? They're sharing it with the people that look a lot like them. So if your buyer, for in our case, when a VP of marketing at a B2B SaaS company shares our content, who do you think they're friends with? Other VPs of marketing at B2B SaaS companies that we want to work with. So the targetedness of their audience is so much better than a lot of these big name influencers that you think, oh, because it's a big number, then that's the kind of people that I want listening to my show. But there are so many people that listen to Simon Sinek and Gary Vee that would never want to do business with us. So I think people get too caught up in the romance of the I don't know, the sexiness of the big number, and they don't actually realize that that's not going to actually translate to growth in your own business. Now, I like the fact that we've had a couple big names on our show because it allows us to reach out to our ideal buyer and say, hey, we've had Gary Vee, we've had Simon Sinek. And
Sure.
if our ideal buyer cares about that, they're like, oh, this show must be credible. I want to be a guest on that show as well. So it does help. But I think if you have one or two names like that you get, and honestly, for me, it happened really serendipitously. It wasn't something I focused on. It just, over the course of doing episode after episode after episode after episode, those opportunities came to me. I don't necessarily think that can happen to everyone. I don't want to say that it serendipitously worked out, and I
Makes sense.
enjoy that it worked out that way. But I by no means was trying to make those things happen. And so I think in the same way, for folks listening to this, doing their podcast, if your head's down focused on serving your ideal buyer and trying to create the best possible content for your ideal buyer by having a lot of conversations with your ideal buyers, those kinds of opportunities to interview the big names, they're gonna come and go. A friend of mine, Dennis Brown, he hosts a podcast called Growth Experts, and he just interviewed Grant Cardone. And I have no clue how he did it. I don't know if because of COVID-19, if Grant Cardone's got a lot of spare time now. I don't know how that worked out. But when Dennis promoted that episode on LinkedIn, I was like, man, that sounds interesting. I'm going to go over and listen to his podcast. I ended up listening to several more episodes after I listened to the Grant Cardone episode. So big names can be helpful when promoting to your own audience, but Dennis does a phenomenal job of promoting his show to his audience on LinkedIn. I think he's got over 30,000 followers on the platform. And so his show is doing well because he markets his show well. And it would be doing well regardless of whether he interviewed Grant Cardone or not. So I just don't think it should be a focus for a lot of people, especially in the early days.
Yeah, that's a big eye opener. I see what you mean. It can be a good hook and it can be a good tool to establish credibility when you're going to
Yep.
guests you want, but it's not the be all and end all.
You're
Awesome.
exactly right.
All right, James. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. It's been a pleasure having you on. So everyone, you've been tuning into Sam's Business Growth Show, where we sit down with business leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs from around the globe. We find out their story, how digital marketing has helped along the way, and their exclusive tips and insights to help you skyrocket your business. James, I'd like to ask everyone, if you could thank just one person, either dead or alive, having a positive influence on yourself and your career, who would that be and why?
Oh man, I would say a gentleman by the name of Bob Goff, who wrote a book called Love Does. And this inspired my first business, Worth Day Planner. Bob's book, Love Does, really changed my life and inspired me to start proactively loving the people in my life with my actions. So I've always been a words of affirmation. I've been a very encouraging person with my words, but Love Does, Bob's book, really inspired me to start thinking creatively about the actions that I take toward people and how I can proactively love them with my actions. And so that's the person I would thank.
Awesome, man. And James, tell us a bit more about your business. Tell us the best way people can get in touch, a bit more about your book and how people can connect with you.
Yeah, so you can find the book on Audible or Amazon. I narrate the book, and then I've also got my my cell phone number in the back of the book. So if you want to text me after you read it, I love hearing from folks that have read the book. So you can find that just searching content-based networking on Audible or Amazon. The business is sweetfishmedia.com. You can go and check what we're all about. We launch podcasts all the time for different B2B companies. We'd love to hear from you there. You can reach out to me or Logan on our team, Logan at sweetfishmedia.com or James at sweetfishmedia.com. I'm all over LinkedIn, James Carbary, Carbary. Would love to connect with you there as well. And so, yeah, would love to connect with anybody listening.
Are you tired of constantly hunting for new customers? You could be missing out on regular inbound opportunities, all because your website isn't on the first page of Google. Perhaps you're already spending lots of money on advertising, but your website is failing to convert all of your hard-earned visitors into a consistent flow of new customers. If you'd like to learn more about our unusual approach that brings idle clients straight to you, connect with Sam Dunning on LinkedIn or book a free 20-minute consultation via webchoiceuk.com. That's webchoiceuk.com. Subscribe today for more digital marketing, sales, and business growth tips from the experts.